Hi, this is Sam Weigel of V1 Rotate coming to you from Cancun, Mexico. I'm here on a 24-hour work layover because about 6 weeks ago, one of my airline's crew planners built it as part of a Seattle 737 3-day trip. Early last month, this trip was loaded into my airline's preferential bidding system, or PBS software, where Seattle 737 captains and first officers could bid on it and all the other December pairings in seniority order. I'm about halfway down the captain list, and by the time the system got to me, the trip was still available and the system determined that it best met my preferences. PBS put this trip on my monthly line, and here I am. It's hard for me to overemphasize how important bidding is to the life of an airline pilot. It won't just determine where you fly and where you lay over, it'll also decide when you work and what days you have off, which birthdays and anniversaries and holidays you spend at home with the family versus on the road, how much or how little flying you do and therefore how much you make, whether you spend a lot of time commuting, how you can squeeze that 2-week trip to Italy into 1-week vacation. Creative bidding strategies and knowledge of the software allowed me to take 3 mostly full winters off work to sail the Bahamas and the Caribbean. So, with schedule bidding so all important to airline crew life, you'd think the airlines would take the time to teach their new hires how it all works, right? Nope. Most of them just give you your login info to the system and say good luck. The pilot unions take a more active role in education, but even then, the onus is on the new hire pilot to reach out and seek guidance on how it all works. The thing is, when you're new and ultra junior, there isn't a ton of motivation to learn bidding because A, there's so much other new stuff for you to learn, and B, you're ultra junior, so it doesn't make that much of a difference at first. You're going to take whatever is left over. But as you gain even a little bit of seniority, a good working knowledge of your airline's bidding system will provide major gains to your quality of life, especially in categories where pilots senior to you haven't taken the time to learn all the ins and outs of the system. I've often said that an excellent knowledge of PBS is worth a good 15 or 20% bump in seniority. So, whether you're making the jump from flight instructing to the regional airlines or getting out of the military and getting on with a major, it'll be worth your while to learn everything you can about your airline's preferential bidding system. Before the widespread adoption of PBS, most airlines used line bidding. I use this system at Horizon Air, and it's still in use at some smaller airlines. Basically, the airline creates a bunch of generic normal and reserve lines that cover the planned flying and equal the total number of pilots in the category. For example, when I was a Portland Q400 first officer and there were 85 pilots in the category, the company might create 70 normal lines and 15 reserve lines. No single line was likely to fit all your criteria, but you could go down the list and find the ones that work best for you. This could be quite time-consuming, especially when junior in category. After all, the senior-most pilot only needed to choose one line, but pilot number 60 would need to list 60 lines in order of preference. The advantage of the system from a pilot standpoint is that there are inefficiencies where pre-built lines touch vacation and training days, which you can use to gain more paid days off. These inefficiencies don't exist with PBS because the software builds you a custom line based on your preferences, taking things like training dates and vacation weeks into account. It works like this. The company builds a large number of trips of various lengths to cover all the planned flying in each category. Before the bids open, the company loads these trips into the PBS software and designates an average line value and line construction window or range of hours that will ensure all the planned flying gets covered with the available pilots. There are a number of different PBS software vendors. My company uses NavBlue, and my last airline used AOS. They all work differently, and this is where you'll really want to take a deep dive into the documentation provided by the vendor, the company, and the union. I'm showing you the NavBlue system here as a general familiarization. The one thing that all PBS systems have in common is logic-based bidding. You really need to think like a computer using the software's logic when formulating your bidding strategy and entering your bid. So you can see here that I'm 81 out of 158 Seattle-based 737 captains, or about 51%, and that my category has an average line value of 72 hours with a line construction window of 65 hours to 79:30. I generally try to get a schedule at the bottom end of the LCW and then pick up a few days of overtime flying at 200% pay. This affects my bidding strategy. I will note that at my airline, January only has 30 days. The 31st is part of the February bidding period. This is quite common at the airlines, and at Horizon, we had 5-week bidding periods, which consequently didn't correspond to calendar months at all. Here, I'm looking at my pre-awards. In January, I do not have any carry-in pairings from the previous month since I'm off December 24th to 31st, and I also do not have training, but I do have 13 days of vacation that I bid for last year. At the time, I was planning a Baja dirt bike ride this January, but now, with my hangar/living quarters project delayed, I will be sticking around Washington working on that. The vacation isn't exactly where I want it now, and fortunately, we have a process to slide it, which will heavily affect my bidding strategy. The vacation is worth 47 hours, so I will need to bid for at least 18 hours of additional flying to get within the line construction window. I always check with my wife Dawn before starting bidding. We have a rather busy January planned, and I'm hoping my 51% seniority will be able to swing it. First, we're doing a sailing trip in the British Virgin Islands over New Year's, returning the 3rd. I'd prefer to give myself a buffer day on the 4th. My wife is going on a humanitarian trip to Thailand over the last 10 days of the month, and she has a paid ticket from Tokyo to Bangkok, departing on the 21st. We're going to non-rev together to Tokyo on the 18th, with me returning solo the 21st. And finally, my dad is coming back out to Washington to help me with the hangar project the 22nd to the end of the month. I have decided that my bidding strategy this month will be to slide my vacation 10 days later to cover the Tokyo trip and the hangar project time with my dad, and then to find a suitable combination of trips during the 9th through the 13th and or the 16th and 17th to get me within the line construction window. I'll target 68 to 70 hours. That will leave the weekends of the 7th and 14th free to pick up overtime flying. Okay, the bids tab is where it all happens. We are creating bid lines here that are akin to lines of code, and in NavBlue, it is important to remember that the software always works top to bottom and left to right. You put your most important preferences first. AOS bidding software also works this way, while other PBS vendors have you assign a point value to each item to delineate its relative importance to you. First, I add a bid group, and this month I do not wish to set reserve, so I will check Pairing Bid Group and select Apply. This becomes line 1 of my bid. I know that NavBlue requires me to set conditions first within the bid group, so I select Minimum Credit Window here, as usual, and Apply, line 2. Now, there's another item here that is very important to me this month, Slide Vacation. I haven't used this one in a couple of years, so it's important to go check the documentation. First, I check NavBlue's guide, which, as usual, is not very helpful, but the ALPA PBS guide is much better. It tells me everything I need to know. I decide to slide my vacation anywhere between 10 and 7 days later. The system will attempt to do the full 10 days if possible. But if the system can't slide my vacation even 7 days, this will completely change my bidding strategy for January, so in that case, I would want to start a new bid group. Next comes my preferred days off. I really need the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd off because we'll be sailing, and prefer the 18th through 21st off for going to Tokyo, in this order of importance. I'm doing this because the Alpha documentation says to ask for days off even if you anticipate them getting covered by vacation slide. I'll also ask for the 28th, 29th, and 30th off in case the vacation slide only goes 7 days. Finally, my buffer day on the 4th. Now I'm going to ask for those weekend days off that I want to try to pick up overtime, and then the days around them in order of descending preference. When I apply, you can see the order that PBS considers all these days. I could also ask for general weekends off, but PBS would consider all weekend days to be equal, and I've found that this software rewards specificity. Next, I'll do my avoid and award pairings. NavBlue treats these two very differently, and in most cases, it's best to do avoids first, though I'll juggle the order around later. Here, we're telling PBS what we'd rather not do. For me, the number one thing is ultra early shows and very late releases. I'm not a commuter per se, but we're a single car family and I prefer to come across Puget Sound via ferry and light rail. so I avoid report and release times that conflict with the ferry schedules. I also have rather thin blood after my Caribbean adventure, so I try to avoid certain layovers in January. Sorry, Mom and Dad. And now, award pairings. Note, at this point, the number of available pairings has been whittled down both by the 80 captains that are senior to me, as well as by all of my above preferences. Of the remaining pairings, I'm telling PBS to just go ahead and award anything that meets particular criteria. I often do this with specific layovers. This is January and I live in Seattle, so Aruba is definitely at the top of my list. Reasonably long Mexico layovers are good too. I've done a lot of San Salvador and actually enjoy it, and I'd like to bring my rig to work and skydive on a layover if possible, so a long layover in Phoenix, Orlando, Daytona Beach, or San Diego would work well. I'm going to tweak the order here because I don't mind flying somewhere cold if the trip also contains a good island or Mexico layover. And I'll fly to Minneapolis and see the family if I can also skydive. But what if all such pairings are taken? The program will move to the last default line, Award Pairings. It will automatically build me a schedule that falls within the line construction window while attempting to honor as many of my preferences as possible given my seniority. Now, like I said, NavBlue rewards specificity in bidding, so now that my general bids are entered, I'm going to look at some specific trips in the Pairings tab and see if I can't sharpshoot a few. First, I highlight where I'm putting these quite high in my bid. That means I'm going to have to be careful because I am overriding all the preferences beneath these lines. I know I need to find a minimum of 18 hours credit on these days, so I'm looking at specific pairings departing on the 9th and 10th and sorting them by credit. I select every pairing that I like and create an award pairing on date bid line for each. Then I go to the Bids tab, take a look at all the pairings I've bid, and rearrange them in order of preference. My bid for January is a bit more complex than most months because I don't know for certain that my vacation slide request will be honored. It's all dependent on staffing. So remember how I put an or else start new bid group statement in the vacation slide line? Now I have to create that insurance bid group. I'll make it easier by copying and pasting the current bid group. Then I'll edit the vacation slide. If PBS got to this group, it means it couldn't honor a 7 to 10 day slide, so I'll request a 1 to 6 day slide, whatever it can do. And now I'm going to really concentrate on getting an 18 credit trip between the 5th and the 8th in case it can't slide at all, because then I'll still have off from the 9th to the end of the month. And if I can't do that, I'll fly on the 4th, preferably reporting late in the day. I usually put at least an hour into bidding each month, sometimes several hours. Sometimes I rethink my bidding strategy and redo my bids, and sometimes I call up an ALPA volunteer and run my bids past them. At the airlines, you can concentrate on making money or on maximizing quality of life. When a company is as understaffed as mine is, making money is easy, but it takes real effort plus some seniority to maintain a good work-life balance. I hope this short introduction to a pretty complex subject has convinced you that when you get to an airline, you need to really put the time and effort into thoroughly educating yourself on how your company's bidding system works. Your best resource for doing so will almost always be the hardworking PBS and scheduling committee volunteers at your local chapter of the Airline Pilots Association or other pilot union. Thanks for watching V1 Rotate, and for more great content for new and aspiring professional pilots, join me here at flyingmag.com every first and third Friday of the month.